This month's podcasts are sponsored by Aubergine Legal. Do you sometimes worry that your business isn't meeting all its legal compliance requirements and wonder if you're ticking all the legal boxes? Are you losing sleep worrying about a piece of legislation that you may or may not be complying with? Perhaps you need some help with your client contracts or your data protection compliance. Or maybe you're worried that your website doesn't have the right documents or legal notices in the right place. Perhaps you have a brand that you want to protect with a trademark. How about if you could outsource it all and eliminate all of your worries? If so, then get in touch with Aubergine Legal, a friendly commercial legal consultancy offering practical and clear commercial legal advice without the overwhelming legal jargon, taking the worry away and helping you to protect your business and minimise your risks. Aubergine offers a free 30-minute consultation if you have any questions or want to find out if they can help, and you can access this link and book your free 30-minute call via the link in the show notes. Welcome to the Bring Your Product Idea to Life podcast. This is the podcast for you if you're getting started selling products or if you'd like to create your own product to sell. I'm Vicky Weinberg, a product creation coach and Amazon expert. Every week I share friendly, practical advice as well as inspirational stories from small businesses. Let's get started. Hi and welcome to the 4th anniversary episode of Bring Your Product Idea to Life. I am so excited that you're listening to this 4 years in, and today the day the episode is released, not today the day I'm recording, is my birthday, so that's super exciting too. So for this episode I wanted to do something different, and you might have seen that on social media and in my emails I've been asking you to submit your questions that I can answer on this podcast episode. Thank you so much to everyone who submitted a question. I can't answer all of them, and actually I literally can't answer all of them because some of them are just not in my area of expertise, but I am going to do my best. So if I haven't answered your question, thank you for sending it, and hopefully I can do another one of these episodes in the future and be able to answer more. I would love to know what kind of things you'd like to see me talk about over the next 4 years. Let me know. I'm always open to feedback. If you enjoy this episode, I can do more like this, or if there's any content you'd like me to see me cover, of course let me know. And as always, don't worry, there will be lots of amazing guests, and I actually have guests on the podcast booked up I want to say until like this autumn, which is mind-blowing, but so that's exciting. So I have taken the questions, I've gone through them, I've selected the ones I'm going to answer today, and I've tried to sort of group them a little bit. So the first questions that I'm going to answer are ones that are related to me. And the first question is, how did you make the transition from product business to product launch consultant? So I actually talked a bit about my story back in episode 14, but of course, especially if you're a new listener to the podcast, I don't expect you to go all the way back to then. So I will try and summarise my story here. And I'll actually say as well that I wouldn't consider myself to be a product launch consultant. That is something I used to specialise in, but now I'm very much focused on selling on Amazon. I don't offer any services in terms of product creation. I spoke about that in a podcast episode earlier this year, like why that is, my reasons for it, and what I can help you with now, which is selling on Amazon. However, my book is available still in print, still on Amazon. So if you do want help with bringing a product idea to life, the book is an amazing resource for that, if I say so myself. So, and I'll link to that in the show notes, so you can get my book. So in terms of my story, back when my daughter, who's my second child, was born, which was 2016, she's just turned 8. I hadn't been able to work for a while. I'd done various things. I was running a children's yoga business at the time, but the issues I had within pregnancy meant I couldn't actually teach yoga, because teaching yoga to children is a lot of getting on down to the floor, back up again. Couldn't do that, like physically I wasn't in a good way really, and so I couldn't actually teach. So I had some lovely teachers working for me, going into nurseries and preschools and delivering the sessions, and I was running the business side of the business. But actually at that point we were fairly well established. There wasn't actually much for me to do, and as silly as this might sound, given that I'm telling you this is my second child, I had a 3-year-old and a baby, I was actually like a bit sort of restless and wanting to just do something else. I heard a podcast. I can remember which podcast. Can I remember what it was? I'm not sure I can actually back now. But I was listening to a podcast episode and it was talking, oh, yes, I can. It was talking about passive income. And they had some guests on the podcast and they were talking about, it was two men, and they were talking about how they had just launched their own range of yoga products. I think it was yoga mats and a few other things. And they were selling these products on Amazon, and they were living this like laptop lifestyle where they were traveling the world and working by swimming pools and things. And obviously with a young family, that was what I say, obviously, but maybe not obviously, but that wasn't what I was after at that time. But I did kind of think, that sounds like something I could do that would give me a lot of freedom. I don't have to be in a certain place at a certain time. It seemed very flexible, like I could work around my family, which is what I needed. So I started looking into ideas for products, and I launched my own brand of premium baby products towards the end of that year. I think it took me about 9 months to go from idea to having products for sale. And I started selling my products initially on Shopify. I then put them on Amazon, and I did a lot of research into Amazon before going ahead and doing that. I always thought that I would sell lots of, Shopify would be the thing, and I had this website, and I actually had a blog that I set up before I even had any products for sale, where I was sort of talking about my journey and what I was doing and the steps I was going through and the mistakes I was making and all of this in sort of lifetime. And I always thought, the website will be where people will find me and my products and they'll come and buy them. And yes, people did buy on the website, but a lot more people bought my products on Amazon. Although the website turned out to be useful for another reason, is the blog, which was just something I was doing in the hope of, helping people find information, became two things. It was a starting point for this podcast, because as I mentioned, I got the idea for my business from a podcast, and I started thinking, there isn't a podcast out there that's entirely what I'm looking for. So when I was trying to find information about selling products, creating products, selling on Amazon, everyone I heard from on these podcasts was so much further ahead than I was. And I was like, there's nothing that just feels relatable to me, which was the catalyst for this podcast that you're listening to 4 years on. So that's really exciting. And that also was how I ended up being a consultant as well, because people were finding me through my blog and they were saying, I want to create a product, and how did you go about manufacturing, or where did you do this, or can you give advice on that? And I was giving out tons of advice, and I reached a point where I was like, I've been giving away lots of advice for free, and I want to say this was my bright idea, but it wasn't. It was my husband who kept saying, you're giving all this advice away for free, you could be charging people. I had a lot of imposter syndrome, and I was like, I can't be charging people, I'm not an expert. But as soon as I sort of realised, actually, I don't need to be an expert, I just need to be able to genuinely help the person who needs my help. I need to know a bit more than them and be able to add value. That kind of changed things for me. And I started doing a bit of freelancing, helping people with various aspects of creating a product to sell. And then, time went on, I got better and better at Amazon. Amazon, as I alluded to, was like most of my product sales were on Amazon rather than my own website. I got quite good at it. People started asking for help on that. And then in 2020, when the pandemic hit, so almost exactly the same week, actually was the same week this podcast launched. The podcast first episode came out the first week. We were in lockdown in the UK, and around that time Amazon made some changes as well to the kind of products that could be sold and fulfilled by Amazon, and there were lots of businesses wanting to get onto Amazon at that time, and I suddenly became really busy. At the same time, I was running out of my own products to sell because the stock was running down really fast, but the factories were closed, I couldn't get any more products made. And then of course there were lots of shipping issues. So actually all kind of, I don't know if it was a happy accident coincidence, but I started helping lots of other businesses selling their products on Amazon, and I realised that actually I really, really enjoy it. And I think that I get more fulfillment from helping others sell their products than I did selling my own. I also realised that for me it was a way of connecting and working with other people, which was something I think I missed since having my children. I left the corporate world where I was going to an office and I was like being with people every day, and I didn't actually realise how much I valued that. So that is my story. That I said that was a quick version, but actually possibly not that quick. But that is really how I got into it. And over the years, I've just refined what I do and what I offer. So as I mentioned, I don't offer any services around product creation anymore. I focus very much on selling on Amazon. That's definitely my area of expertise. And if you need any help with Amazon, you know where to come. So the second question is also about me and my business. And this person is asking, how much of my business do I outsource? So honest answer is lots. At the moment, I think I outsource quite a lot. However, this has grown over the years. When I started all of my businesses, it was just me. I had nobody else doing anything. As I mentioned, when I had my yoga business, I hired some teachers to deliver some of the sessions. That was the first time I'd ever worked with somebody else. And then when I had my products business, the very first thing I outsourced was the accountancy. I'm not very good at the bookkeeping side of things. I hold my hands up to that. And so that was the very first thing I outsourced. And I actually feel, my personal opinion is, the things that you don't enjoy and that you aren't good at do seem like a really good place to start when it comes to outsourcing. So I have used a few accountants over the years because I think that getting the right accountant is really important, because obviously the finances is such a key part of your business. So at the moment I use Wendy Ross from Tunbridge Accountants. Wendy will actually be sponsoring some future episodes of this podcast. Couldn't recommend Tunbridge Accountants highly enough. I'm not being paid to say that in this episode, but Wendy is amazing, because she at the time was able, well, she's amazing now, but what I think was really valuable when I was running a products business and the consultancy, because there was a period of a couple of years where I was running both businesses, and she was great at handling both sides, which I think is really important, because the business was quite complex, because I had all the freelance work I was doing, and then there's the products side, and I think she did a great job at that, and trust her entirely. And I think having a great accountant, especially as you grow, is so important. Then the next thing that I outsourced was the podcast. I'm going to call it podcast production. So as you can hear, it is me recording all these episodes. I also book my own guests. I plan the episodes. If I'm interviewing a guest, I plan what I'm asking them. I actually recorded a whole episode about the process of this podcast, which is episode 193, so you can go back and listen to that if you want to. But what I do have now is a team who helps me with things like getting the podcast file uploaded to the relevant places, speaking to guests, sharing the episode and the artwork with them, actually creating the artwork, creating some of the social posts you see for the podcast. So I definitely am the person who is booking in the guests and speaking with the guests and planning the content for the podcast. But once the episode is recorded, I do have some support to go from getting the episode recorded to getting it released. I started doing that a few years ago because I felt that it was coming up to the summer and I was really panicking because back then I was doing everything for the podcast. I was starting panicking. It's going to be the summer holidays. How will I get an episode out every week? I'm going away for 2 weeks, and realised I need some help. So I now work with Jennifer Cooper Timesaver and her team, and Jenny and her team are amazing. It doesn't matter whether Jenny's on holiday or someone else is on holiday. That team between them make sure that I have a podcast episode out every single week, which is amazing and definitely puts my mind at rest. And it's also enabled me to work much further ahead as well. So now I have episodes recorded and edited and lined up, ready to go weeks, if not months in advance, which is amazing and gives me a lot of peace of mind that should I be ill or should I go away for a couple of weeks, I can actually take a break and the podcast will continue without me. And I think, and this wasn't in the question, but I think that is one of the reasons I've been able to keep this podcast going for 4 years. It's just that there's just a consistent flow of content. I never ever want to miss an episode. And then speaking about the podcast, I also at the beginning of 2023 started outsourcing podcast editing, because up until that point I was still doing the editing. So that was another piece I was doing. I now have a podcast editor. Again, I tried a few. So he's not the first podcast editor I started working with. I think he's maybe the third, because you have to find somebody that works for you, is responsive, you're happy with the quality, and I have that now. And then I've outsourced other things as and when. So, for example, my website was built by Marie Brown from Beyond the Kitchen Table. Before working with Marie, I'd always built my own websites. I've used things like WordPress, Wix, various platforms. However, I got to a point where I was like, do you know what? I want a really professional website. So I'd actually worked with Cara Bendon, who did my branding. And after Cara had done this beautiful branding for me, I was like, I want a new website that reflects my branding. However, I don't think I'm capable of building it myself. And also, probably more importantly, I don't think I have the time. And I think the further I've gone into my business, the busier I've got supporting my clients, the more I've been able to outsource the things that take time, but, are not necessarily in my area of expertise, or not necessarily the things I should be spending my time on. And as I said, I outsource other things as and when. So I've outsourced PR before, social media, some ad hoc admin tasks. I've actually just started getting a bit more admin support now as I get busier with my clients. Something that's sort of been on my mind is that I don't want, the running of the business to sort of fall behind. But the only thing that I don't outsource and do not ever foresee me outsourcing is client work. So if you work with me, you'll always be working with me. I'm the only person who has access to my clients' Amazon's accounts. I'm the only person who does any hands-on work for my clients. And that's kind of the way I want to run my business. And that's part of the reason that I'm outsourcing other things, because eventually I'd love to get to the point where the only thing I do is record these podcast episodes and work with clients. That is the ultimate goal, and to have people to support me with the rest of the business, which doesn't necessarily need to be me. So we now have some questions about Amazon. So the first question is, do you have any recommendations for how to manage the bookkeeping of Amazon sales? Disappointingly, I'm going to have to say no. I'm really sorry. Bookkeeping, as I've mentioned before, isn't my area of expertise, and I suggest finding a great accountant, as I've spoken about earlier, or finding some software. So in the original question, the questioner said they use software called Free Agent. I don't know Free Agent, but have a look into software you can find that can help you. But ultimately, Amazon bookkeeping, the reports you get are what they are. I can certainly help you by pointing you in the direction of what's available, what you can download, where you can find it, but really you need to be working with an accountant. The second question is, how much should you budget for or expect to pay for product images, and what sort of licensing agreement would you recommend? Again, because I'm being really honest here, this is not my area of expertise, because as I've mentioned, my area of expertise is Amazon, and while I have a lot of expertise in creating products and bringing products to life, you can't be the expert in everything. And product photography is not my area. I would say that you should be speaking to a photographer about licensing agreements. I know that whenever I've worked with a photographer in the past, whether it's product images, whether it's headshots, they have basically told me how images can be used, how they need to be referenced. As you can tell, not the expert. So I think you definitely need to speak to a good product photographer. I've actually recorded 2 episodes with product photographers that I think are a great place to start if you're thinking about product images. So the first one is episode 34 with Georgina Little. And Georgina speaks about how to find a photographer, how to work with a photographer, what shots you need, how to put together a good brief. I think this is a really great episode because if you have a budget for product photography, wherever that is, you want that budget to be put to good use. And Georgina has some really good tips about how you can make sure that you're really getting everything you need from a product photographer, so that you come away from it with the images you need, you're happy with the images, and you really feel you're getting your money's worth, whatever you're paying. And then the other episode is episode 116 with Jade Tinkler. And Jade talks about how to take your own product photos. Now, I think this can be super useful if you're on a budget, because Jade talks about, the fact that it is possible to take your own product photos, and gives really practical tips on how to do it. And I know this is possible because for my product business, I actually took my first product photos myself. This was way before I had a podcast, or way before I spoke to Jade about how to do it. I think I used a mixture of the internet, YouTube, and I managed to take my own product photos. I edited them and they were passable. Have to say, they were very basic photos, the product on a white background. However, they were good enough. And I think sometimes at the beginning, good enough is good enough. And yes, I'm going to be talking a bit later about the importance of having great product images in particular, but when you're just getting started, especially if you're on a budget, I do think that if you can take good product photos yourself, that gets you off to a start. Once you start making some sales, you have some money coming in, perhaps you can then invest in getting some professional photos taken. And there are other ways as well to get product photos taken that are more affordable. I believe in one of the episodes, one of the guests did speak about finding a photography student who might be looking to get work for a portfolio, so they might be able to offer you photos slightly less. And then of course, if you've got a bigger budget but you're just trying to look for an idea of how much you can spend, my gut feeling would be like it's like a piece of string. It very much is going to depend on how many photos you need, the type of photos you need, the experience of the photographer. So I can't give you a definitive answer, so apologies for that, but hopefully I've given you enough that you can go away and find out a bit more for yourself. So the next question in the Amazon category is, do you have any tips for getting ranked in Amazon to increase visibility? So for anyone who doesn't know what that means, ranking, it means, in short, where you show up in the search results. So when you type something into the Amazon search bar, where do you show on the page? And obviously the higher the better. And yeah, I have loads of tips. I actually recorded a whole episode on this, which is episode 180, how to rank higher on Amazon. And there is a blog post to accompany that podcast. So yeah, I have lots of information on this. However, I will do a quick overview here because I appreciate you might not want to go away and dig out another episode right now. So as a recap, I think the person has asked this question because where you show up on Amazon really matters. And I get people contacting me, not as much as I used to, because I think I talk about this so much now, but I used to get people saying to me all the time, I can't find my own product listing. I've listed my product on Amazon and I can't find it. As I say, I hear less of this now, but I think it's because everyone knows my opinion on this, which is unless you've put a lot of work into getting your listing found, and I am going to talk a bit now about how to do that, you won't. Simply put, if you put your product on Amazon and sit back and cross your fingers, you're not going to rank at all. You'll be lucky if you're on page 10, page 20. I feel really harsh saying that every time, but it is the truth. So some statistics for you. Studies show that products on the first page of Amazon search results get 80% of all clicks, at least 80% of all clicks. And the first 3 products on page 1 get 60% of those clicks. So, if you're not on page 1, it'll be much harder to get found. Because also, how many shoppers, think yourself, do you ever go past page 1 of the search results? I'd say I do very, very rarely, and I'm sure you're the same. So yeah, ranking as high as possible, ideally in those top 3 spots, although often you will see that those top 3 spots are reserved for sponsor products, so basically people who've paid to be there. So if you want to be on the top of the page organically or anywhere on page 1, you need to put a bit of work in. And how ranking is established, so how Amazon decides who is shown where, other than if you're paying for ads, which is something completely different, but where you show up on the search page organically, so without paying for it, is down to the Amazon algorithm. Now, you may have heard that this is quite secretive, and I guess it is to a point. Amazon don't share tons about their algorithm, but I'm going to tell you about what we do know. So there are 2 factors that determine how well your product will rank on Amazon, so how high up it shows. So the first is performance and conversion ranking factors, and the second is relevancy factors. So performance and conversion ranking factors, what that basic means is how many sales are you making and how well are your products converting? Because the more products you sell on Amazon and the more money you make, the more money Amazon makes. So Amazon are always going to prioritise products that are already selling well over newer products that maybe haven't sold any, or products that are making fewer sales. So often what you'll see at the top of the search results for organic search is the products that are selling the best in any, for any particular search term. Speaking of search terms, the second thing I spoke about, the second factor, is relevancy. And what relevancy means is having a well-optimized product listing that reflects the product you're selling. And this is conversions play a part here too, because if you are showing up for a particular search and you're getting lots of clicks, so lots of people are going to look at your product but they're not buying it, the algorithm is going to assume that your product isn't relevant for that search, and this means that your ranking for that particular keyword or phrase will drop. And actually, when we talk about ranking, something else to bear in mind is that you will be ranking for different keywords. So let's say you sell a hairbrush, you might be looking to rank for, well, actually the term hairbrush would be incredibly hard to rank for, but you might be looking to rank for hairbrush for curly hair, hairbrush with natural fibres, whatever it was, you'd be looking to rank for different search terms. When we talk about ranking, that's what we're talking about. When someone types a particular word or phrase, hopefully a phrase, because it's incredibly hard to rank for words, someone types a phrase into the search bar and you are hoping to come up for that phrase, you're hoping to rank for that particular phrase, and there will probably be, depending what you sell, a handful of keywords and phrases that you want to rank for. So hopefully that background has helped, because this will help put the suggestions I'm about to give you into a bit of context. So the first thing you need to do is have a great product listing that ranks for relevancy, because unless your product is relevant and converting well, you're going to struggle to improve your product sales organically. So it's definitely a baseline. Hopefully that makes sense. It's like a chicken and egg thing, isn't it? But yeah, if your product listing is really good and it's really relevant, that will help with the relevancy factor, but that will also help with the sales and the reviews as well. Because if your product isn't relevant, if your title, your images, your listing doesn't accurately reflect your product, you might also find that leads to more returns, and having a high returns rate is another thing that will negatively impact your ranking as well. So in terms of what you do is, as I said, most customers, they go to Amazon, they're looking to buy something and they type what they're looking for into the search bar. And that's why knowing what those words and phrases customers are looking for is really important. So your product listings need to have a title, key features, description and search terms that are really well written, and they're well optimized for Amazon's SEO, which I should also say is different from Google. Don't use Google keywords to find the keywords to use in your Amazon listings, because they won't necessarily be the same, because obviously Google is a different type of search engine than Amazon. You also need to have really great images, graphics, infographics on your listing. If you're able to, you should be taking advantage of Amazon features such as A+ content. You might want to have a store. And I talk about these things in a lot more detail in other episodes. I won't go into great detail here. And of course, if you have questions about anything I'm saying, do get in touch. And remember that when you're looking at an Amazon search results page, you can see two things. You can see a product image and you can see the title. So your main image has to work really well to entice people to click through to your listing. So coming back to what we were speaking about product photography earlier, Amazon requires that your main image is on a white background. So that might be a good shot, that's a fairly simple shot. However, it also has to be effective at showing what your product is. And of course, there are other things that will affect, your ranking. So for example, your product price and how you're fulfilling your orders. But, that's all things that we can go into in other episodes. And I'll finally say that if you're new on Amazon and you're looking to rank, or even if you've been on Amazon for a while, you will need to put some work in to get some sales and to get some product reviews, because that will help you start ranking for the performance factor. I hope this helps as an overview, and as I mentioned, I have a full episode that goes into lots more detail. As you can tell, Amazon's something I like talking about, so I probably went into quite a bit of detail here, but I do have a full episode and the blog post if you want to learn even more. And the final question I'm going to cover today, because we're coming up to the 30-minute mark, and I do try and keep these episodes, especially when it's just me, relatively brief, because I'm not sure how much of my voice you want to be listening to. And my final question is, I recently went out of stock on Amazon FBA. I've heard this is the worst thing ever, as it's hard to come back from. Is there anything I need to focus on to get back sales? So I'll start by saying, don't worry, it's not the worst thing ever. I mean, having said that, it's not helpful. You'd rather not go out of stock, but it's not the worst thing ever. There are plenty worse things you can do on Amazon. this isn't going to, you're not going to get kicked off the platform for this. You're not going to get penalised. It's just annoying because once you're out of stock, you are going to start dropping through the rankings. So we just spoke about rankings just now. And when you're out of stock, obviously you're not making sales, you're not getting reviews, other sellers are. So they're going to get starting shown higher on the search results page and you're going to be shown lower. So in terms of how to deal with this, something I recommend to my clients, if at all possible, is as well as having an FBA offer on Amazon. So for anyone who isn't clear, FBA is where Amazon fulfills orders for you. You send your stock to their fulfillment centres, they store it and ship it out to customers. Is you also have what's called an FBM offer. FBM means fulfilled by merchant. So when you set up your listings on Amazon, you can effectively duplicate them so that for one product you have two listings. You have the one that Amazon fulfills and the one that you fulfill. And it might be that you never want to fulfill orders on Amazon unless it's an emergency, so therefore you just set your stock level to 0 for your FBM offer. But if your FBA stock goes out, you might want to think, actually, rather than my rankings going down, that I've just been working so hard, I've been working really hard, I'm getting shown on page 1 near the top for all my search terms. If you really feel like there's going to be an impact of you being out of stock, and of course that'll depend on, whether you're going to be out of stock for days or weeks, and you have got stock yourself, whether that's in the warehouse, your home, wherever you fulfill orders from, and you think, actually, I could fulfill these Amazon orders myself, you could add some FBM stock. That means that customers can still buy your product. They won't have the prime offer, although I do recommend if you're fulfilling orders yourself, you offer the fastest shipping service that you can. And 2 to 3 days is fine, by the way. I'm not saying it has to be next day. And you offer the customer free delivery, so it's comparable to your FBA offer. And that's a really nice way of the customer still being able to buy your product, because you won't be shown as out of stock. It will just mean that they'll wait slightly longer to get it and you'll be fulfilling it. So that is one thing you can do to prevent that. That's quite a long answer, I know, but I genuinely think that can be really helpful. If not, so if that's not an option for you, maybe you haven't got any stock at all anywhere, so you're waiting to get it from your supplier or your manufacturer before you can send more stock into Amazon. I guess it's just knowing, yes, while you're out of stock, your rankings are going to drop. And yes, you're going to have to do a bit of work to get there again, as you did originally. So you're going to have to be putting in some work to get the sales as you did when you first listed your product on Amazon. It might take a little bit of time. However, it will be easier than starting from scratch because you still have got some sales history. Hopefully you've also got some reviews. So you're not starting from 0, but you are starting from a slightly lower place than you were before before you sold out of all your stock. So it's just doing all of the same things you were doing before. You might not, hopefully if you're listing, you followed all my advice and you've got a really great product listing, you probably won't have to do any work there, but you might need to invest in some ads or something else to kind of get people over to your listing. You will get back to where you were before. Don't worry, that is definitely possible, but know that it might take some time. So that is all of the questions I'm going to answer in this episode. Thank you so much for sending them. If I haven't answered your question, I will try and do that in a future episode. If you'd like me to, was this useful? Should I do it again? Let me know. If you have a question, a particular question about Amazon that you wanted answering and I haven't covered in this episode, the other option is you can book a power hour with me and then we can go through anything and everything. I can answer all of your questions. So not just the questions of everyone's, but I can answer just your questions. We can spend an hour and you can ask me as many questions as you like and I will give you my answer. So until then, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much, particularly to anyone who's been here for 4 years. But thank you, even if this is the first episode you're ever listening to, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being here. I really appreciate you listening. And do know that if you are a new listener, the back catalogue covers so many things. So do take a look and see if there's an episode or episodes that cover your specific questions or queries or whatever you're interested in. And if you need any help with figuring out which is the best episode for you to listen to, get in touch. I would love to be able to help you with that. So yeah, thank you again, and here is to another 4 years. Thank you so much for listening right to the end of this episode. Do remember that you can get the full back catalogue and lots of free resources on my website, vickyweinberg.com. Please do remember to rate and review this episode if you've enjoyed it, and also share it with a friend who you think might find it useful. Thank you again, and see you next week. If you've been inspired to start a podcast in 2024, I really recommend my podcast host, Captivate. Captivate were my top pick when I started podcasting 4 years ago because of how easy it was for a complete novice like me to get started. I've stuck with them for the last 4 years because Captivate is still really simple to use. They keep adding great new features like the ability to share ads like these, and they've just been really reliable. So when you're ready to start your own podcast, you can use the link in the show notes and get a free 7-day trial with Captivate.